Well, the second really bad thing that happened, I had this car that I bought from my parents that I loved, and I drove it and I made it through. I had it sophomore and junior year in college. Now, sophomore year, I strictly said absolutely no drunk driving. If I've drank, I will not drive my car. Well, that went downhill. One night, my roommate had a girl over while I was drinking one night, and we were literally sleeping in the same room. So at like 1 in the morning, he kicks me out of the room so that he can have sex with this girl that he has over. And I'm really lonely, and so what do I decide to do? I decide I'm going to go to Walmart and buy a shotgun. I didn't have any guns at this time, but this is the kind of stuff I did when I was drunk. I decided I'm going to go to Walmart and buy a shotgun. That's what I'm going to do. So I get in my car. That was the first time I drove drunk, and I knew I was doing something really wrong then. And I was lonely. I was drunk. I did it anyway. I was used to doing things I knew I shouldn't do at this point, mostly from drinking. Before I drank, I didn't do too many things that I shouldn't do. But once I had alcohol in me, if I knew I shouldn't do it, more reason to go do it. So I drove to Walmart, and turns out you can't buy a shotgun when you're drunk at 1 in the morning. Thank God. I just walked around, drove back home. Well, that broke the ice on drinking and driving. From there, I started drinking and driving all over the place. I'd drink and drive to go across the street to Sonic. I remember I bumped a car in the parking lot one night, pulled in, boom, whoops, put it in reverse. We'll just back in, park in another parking spot. And by senior year, I was drunk driving all over the place. I literally drunk drove my residents from my freshman hall. I'd drunk drive them out to wherever they wanted to go. We'd go get Sonic, or I'd drunk drive them and drop them off. I'd go to the liquor store. I bought liquor for my residents. I bought and sold liquor to like half my dorm room. I made thousands of dollars selling liquor to underage freshman as I was a resident advisor senior year. I was like training day, man. I was dirty. And that corroded my soul. And right around this time, I was just nuts. I was going to the liquor store every day or two. I was bringing in boxes and boxes of liquor because I was making $10, $20 a bottle. And at this point, I hardly made any money or had any money, and that was my drinking money and my gambling money. And anyone who wanted to buy liquor, just tell Jerry. Jerry has a whole liquor store. I had boxes and boxes. Sometimes I'd have 10, 20, 30 handles. I like the big half-gallon bottles too, because then people didn't need to come by as often and get them. And I could just I'd have fewer bottles. I could spend more and charge more too. Like I could charge like $40 or $50 for a handle of something. And then that maximized my profit margin. And then they could all pool together and buy one bottle of liquor. Well, I wrecked my car right around that time. I was going over to Waffle House at 7 in the morning after drinking all night, starting at around 7 in the evening, drinking all night, playing poker, video games, and watching Fight Club. Yes, it's ironic, isn't it? I got in my car all by myself, drove to Waffle House. I took a turn that you shouldn't go more than 15 or 20 miles an hour around. I went straight into it about 40 miles an hour. And by the time I realized I needed to turn the wheel, I'd already smashed over the curb. So I hit a curb and I ran out into this grass field. And I was so mad because my car, the airbags went off. And everything was screwed up. So I wrecked my car. Thank God I managed to drive it home about 3 or 4 miles. I drove it back to my dorm room and parked it right away because it was obviously wrecked. And then I got in this big panic, called my parents, and I'm like, I just got to get rid of this evidence. What happens if someone sees this RA's got a car that's drunk or that's all smashed up? They're going to want to know why. So I junked it. I took a few $100s for it and got it towed to the dealership and junked it. And then I did without a car for a year after that, which is why I was trying to take the bus to Daytona. And to me, that's the universe's way of helping me. If I'd have had my car longer, I probably would have had something tragic happen. So I was lucky the universe took my car away from me right there. I gave my car away with my own stupid behavior. So after that, I tried to quit drinking for the first time. I said, oh my God, I wrecked my car. I really have a problem now. After 7 days of being sober. Now consider, I had been selling alcohol. I'd been drinking with everyone all the time. There were all these freshman girls. I'd go get drunk. The second night, the first full day that everyone had, I had 7 freshman girls in my room all doing shots, and I thought I had made it. I'm like, I've arrived right now. Now I've finally got it. And I had all these girls that were interested in me just because I could get liquor and I was older, and I thought I'd made it. Right around this time, then I wrecked my car, and I tried to stay sober for 7 days. And I didn't do anything except not drink, and it was miserable. I sat there watching my friends drink, and I thought, life is passing me by. How am I supposed to go through senior year without drinking? And so after 7 days, I decided to start drinking again. And now I had to walk back and forth to the liquor store. And now, to sell people liquor, I had to carry the heavy bottles of liquor a mile from the liquor store in the South Carolina heat, from the liquor store back to my dorm room. And that didn't stop me. I sold liquor as much as I could get away with it. And I walked box after box after box. I tried to stagger it so the same person wouldn't see me bringing in at the front desk. I'd try and stagger it and come in at different times with it. And I always had liquor all the time. I never ran out of liquor once. Meanwhile, one of the other RAs snitched on me. I think he was jealous or something, or maybe he just was trying to help. I don't know. But one of the other RAs snitched on me halfway through freshman year, and my boss confronted me. He said, "Jerry, I heard that you were offering to drunk drive your residents," this freshman students, "I heard you were offering to drunk drive your residents to Sonic." And that was absolutely true. I had absolutely, back when I had my car, made that exact offer. And in fact, I had done that several times. I had drunk drove my residents. I realized he wasn't going to go for a complete lie. That if I just said no, that he was not going to go for that. I'd lied enough times in my life to realize you got to admit something, and omission is a better form of lying than a bold-faced lie. So I said, well, yes, I have been drinking with my residents. I've been drunk. I've been all over the place. I think maybe I'm an alcoholic. I haven't been offering to drive them anywhere, though. That's crazy. So I made it sound like a reasonable exaggeration on whoever had told, well, I know who did it, but I made it sound like a reasonable exaggeration that he had seen me drinking and he just exaggerated or heard me saying things. So I admitted that I'd been drinking around my residents and that I had a problem with alcohol. So I suggested, now I don't remember how I came up with this. I don't remember where it came from. I just thought I don't even remember where I heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. All I knew is I wanted to get out of trouble, and I just had this idea. You know what? If I tell him I've got a problem with alcohol, if I go to an AA meeting with him, that'll give him something concrete he can discipline me for, and then I won't have to get fired. Because one of the other RAs had already got fired for doing the same kinds of stuff I was doing, except he had a party where some girl got sick and nearly died or something like that. So then he got fired after that. And then I went to this Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and it was one of those meetings where you sit at a table. There were like 8 people there. It was a very close-knit meeting. And I was the last person to share. So 6 people shared before me that they were an alcoholic. They shared their experience. Then my boss went with me, and he may have had some drinking problems as well. It seemed like he did. He didn't say he was an alcoholic, but he talked about some of his problems with drinking. I just introduced myself as Jerry. I said, "Hi, I'm Jerry," and I talked about some of my problems with drinking. And I didn't get a white chip. I didn't have any interest in AA. I didn't want a sponsor. I didn't have any interest in getting sober. In fact, I was eager to prove I wasn't an alcoholic, because the people in that meeting told stories that weren't as bad as mine, I thought. One lady had left a bathtub running and flooded a house. Another guy was talking about ducking around in BI-LO, trying to hide his alcohol buying. And these were things I absolutely could relate to. But I wasn't ready yet. I was happy enough, I hadn't had enough pain to change my mind. So I went straight home and had 2 liquor drinks. Now, the same kind of liquor drinks I was then drinking 9 years later, almost. I had 2 of the shots in each one, so I really had about 4 shots when I got home in 2 different liquor drinks. And I said, look, I'm not an alcoholic. I had 2 drinks, and I went to bed. So that was the first time I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, after that, things continue to get worse because there's a certain amount of hell to knowing what you are, to knowing what's wrong, and doing it anyway. So after that, I had this little bit of a knowledge that I shouldn't be in the liquor store. Before that, the liquor store just seemed like candy. This is great. This is heaven. I knew on some deep level that I was doing the wrong thing now because I'd heard people share their experience with it, and it was about the same as mine. And I was starting to relate to this. So my drinking started to get even more and more shameful. And I started to do scarier and scarier things when I got drunk. One night, I had a ski mask because I used to go snowboarding. And I put on all black and got one of my knives out and was gonna plan to go do something terrible. And thank God there was a mirror on the door. Now, I'd been drinking all night, and I looked in the mirror and I saw the person in the mirror, and that stopped me from it. And thank God, there's so many more things, so many things like that, so many things I almost did, so many stupid things I almost did. And I was a horrible boyfriend too. I'd get drunk and literally pass out on my girlfriend. She could barely even breathe. And one time I passed out on her in a chair. She could barely breathe or get up because I was so heavy. And I was terrible. My girlfriend wanted to come drink with me. She was a freshman. She wanted to hang out and have fun, but I knew she couldn't handle all my drinking. She couldn't handle the depths of my drinking. And I felt like I needed to protect her from it. So I kept her away, and this made her really mad. When I had like a big party, I'd try and not let her come over. Like when I threw a keg party, I told her she wasn't invited. And I did that, all kinds of stuff like that to her. And she built up a big resentment over it and eventually dumped me so that she could go have a boyfriend she could drink with on a regular basis. So after I graduated from college, things started to get really messy, and I started trying to do a little bit better. I started trying to get sober. After I quit college, I had one bad thing happen after another. I would continue with this destructive behavior. I would continue with these dangerous activities, and I continued to get more and more scared. One night, I had a night gambling online where I just couldn't take it. Gambling and watching some Hitler video, because I was still into the Nazi stuff. I think I was watching Hitler's intolerance speech. And gambling and watching Hitler online and drinking and just feeling just disgusting. And I cried and I sobbed, and I was talking to my roommate, and I said, okay, I won't drink. I'm going to stop drinking now. So then for a few weeks, I managed to stay sober. And it was miserable. I was at work. At this time, I had a little internship that was full-time, and it was miserable. All I thought about all day was drinking and gambling. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, and I felt I would be listening to the same music I used to listen to when I was drinking, a little Tupac song, How Do You Want It? How Does It Feel? And I would be listening to these Tupac songs, and I'd be having all this nostalgia and feeling so sorry for myself that poor me, I can't drink. What am I going to do now? And at that point, I decided the gambling had to go. Because I'll talk more about the gambling. The gambling was a horrible addiction. That was the most overt, outward addiction I've had. The most purely addictive, least fun, it was rough. So I realized I needed to replace my gambling with a better habit. So I realized I would just stop gambling online and start playing video games instead. So I started playing video games instead, but at the same time I was trying to get sober. And then any little thing that would happen would knock me out of sobriety. For example, after a week or a couple weeks sober one time, my roommate wanted to paint. And he said we should go he's like, you want to go get a few beers and paint? And I said, sure, because I just didn't know how I could paint without having a few beers. And soon enough, getting a few beers to paint turned into me getting liquored up, getting drunk every night. I tried to get sober a whole bunch of different times. I tried to just stop drinking, and every little thing would get me back to a drink. I had this job I didn't like. I quit where the people were all lying there who were getting ahead. They were lying and scamming people. They were making sales for a national telephone company. And the ones who were doing the best and making the biggest commissions, the one that trained me and showed me how he was doing it, he was just outright lying and scamming the people. So what did I do? I didn't know what else to do except go to the liquor store, get a pre-mixed gin and juice, and sit at home and watch a movie. And then I got a job as a correction officer, and that my drinking really got absurd then because I worked a night shift. So I started drinking before I went into work. So I started, and at the same time, I got some kind of like chronic fatigue syndrome or mono or something. I got really sick and my organs started swelling up. And meanwhile, corrections was a dangerous environment. These kids had nearly beat people to death in there. Officers that permanently disabled. This was a dangerous spot, especially for a young white boy with an attitude to be working. This was a very dangerous place for me to be working, especially with my attitude. So I was going in to take the edge off. I lots of times would have 4 or 5 Bud Selects before I even went into work. I didn't do that until I smelled someone else drinking one night at work, and I said, hey, I'm going to start drinking before I come in. So after about 6 months of working in corrections, things had got just scary. One night, I had relapsed on gambling, and I bought a new gun, too, after having a scary drunk night where I was like, we had some party, and by the end of the night, there's this guy trying to hook up with this girl on the couch, and I'm like laying behind them listening to them. And because then I'm like, well, if this guy hears me back here, he's going to beat my ass when he sees me. So I got a couple of big kitchen knives, and I guess they heard me breathing behind them or something. And so they get up, they're messing around on this couch. I think she was cheating on her boyfriend or something with this guy. And here I am laying down with 2 big ass kitchen knives looking just absolutely psycho. Meanwhile, then my roommate comes out of the room and he's naked. He's got some girl in there and he's got a gun. So I go put the kitchen knives away, and thank God they didn't call the police or anything. So after that, I'm like, well, I need to get a gun now. So I buy this gun, and then one night I get drunk, and every time I win a game of poker, a heads up, I open the door up and fire off a couple of shots into the air. So I was just going insane with this stuff. And then my roommate comes home, he's like, did you go to the range yesterday? I'm like, no. Because there's these casings that just were on the ground by the front floor. And thank God no one called the police, because I decided that night if the police come rolling in, I'm just going to open up with my little .22 pistol. And thank God they didn't show up. So I was hardcore. I was insane. I listened to Tupac all the time and these gangster things. And I'm thinking I'm some gangster. I'm some thug. I got just pissed one night. I took my gun out and I was looking to just get into trouble and have a gunfight with someone and to shoot somewhere up. And then thank God, I walked around and I realized I put myself in the exact spot where I pictured kind of getting into it, finding someone. And thank God I realized then that I either needed to do it or take my drunk dumb ass home and go to bed. And so thank God that's what I did. And that one thing there, that was one of the first really shameful things I'd ever done that came up in Alcoholics Anonymous. I felt really bad about that. That's the same kind of, and what's a miracle is you see all these bad things that happen on the news. For every one bad thing that happens, there's 100, if not 1,000 or 10,000 things like that I did, things that almost happened but didn't happen by the grace of God or by some grace. For every one thing that does happen, there's all kinds of horrible bad things that don't happen. I've been through hundreds of those kinds of things like that. Just stupid things that almost happened, but nothing happened, and thank God. So once I got my gun, things got just even stupider. And it wasn't long until the gun was pointed at me. And that was another time I tried to sober up. So I tried to sober up. Well, I sobered up in 2007 in corrections. The kids, I was talking back and forth with these kids, and these are kids I was working in juvenile corrections. Now, in adult corrections, if the kids misbehave, you could just beat the adults up and beat them into submission. The kids, you couldn't touch them though, because then they could file that you'd hit a kid, and you could get a felony and get put in prison yourself. So this is a very dangerous environment with a lot of talk. The kids tried to jump me one day. Like 15 of them got in the bathroom with the light off where there were no cameras. They tried to lure me in there, and thank God I was so afraid I didn't go in there. And meanwhile, they were just trying to get me to quit. Most of the white guys that came in quit within 24 to 48 hours of their first shift. And I made it there 4 months before I just had a complete breakdown. I was sick. I was drinking before coming to work. I was getting hostile with the kids, and something bad was going to happen.